All right, today we're going to do a really deep dive into the scholarly analysis of a single, powerful verse from Surah Maryam in the Quran. We'll be unpacking a dense academic text to see just how one line can open up an entire universe of theological ideas. Let's get right into it. So, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the prophet Ismail and a really unique characteristic of his. From there, we'll talk about the different dimensions of worship. Then, things get a bit more intense as we explore the reality of retribution and the two-sided nature of Jahannam. After that, we'll get into the fascinating and pretty metaphysical concept of the soul in Barzakh, before we wrap it all up by taking a step back to look at the scholarly method itself. Okay, so this is our starting point. Everything we're about to explore, this entire complex analysis, is anchored right here in this one verse. And I want you to pay close attention to the specific way the Prophet Ismail is described, because according to the source we're examining, that exact phrasing is the key that unlocks a much, much broader theological landscape. So the analysis really kicks off with a question about emphasis. The Quran introduces a lot of prophets, but Ismail's introduction here is different. The source text poses a critical question. Why is he defined first by his truthfulness to his promise, even before his title as a prophet? Now, the verse absolutely does state that Ismail was a messenger and a prophet, but it does so only after highlighting this specific moral trait, being Sadiq al-Wa'd. The core argument from the source is that this ordering is completely intentional. It frames his commitment to his word as a foundational piece of who he is, something even more primary than his official role. So, let's be really precise. Sadiq al-Wa'd means one who is truthful in their promise. But the source emphasizes this isn't just about being generally honest. It's a deep, profound quality of integrity and reliability that forms the very bedrock of his character, as he's portrayed here. It's the very first thing we're told to remember about him. All right, let's move to the next part of the verse and see how this all connects. So, having established his personal character, the Quran then describes his public mission. And it wasn't just about his own personal virtue, it was about the actions he called his people to do, specifically prayer and charity. The academic source we're looking at here pushes us to go beyond these literal definitions. It presents salat, or prayer, not just as a set of rituals, but as the complete act of keeping that connection to God alive. And in the same way, zakat isn't just giving money. It's seen as a whole system for purifying oneself spiritually and one's wealth materially. So what Ismail was enjoying was really a holistic system of devotion. And this brings us to the outcome, the result of all this. The verse finishes by saying that because of his character and his teachings, he was mardia, or pleasing to his Lord. Now, the analysis points out that this is not just a casual compliment. In Quranic theology, being pleasing to God is the ultimate sign of spiritual success. The key takeaway here is that his truthfulness and his teachings led directly to this incredibly high spiritual station. Okay, now the analysis takes a really sharp turn. The verses that come right after this praise of the prophets paint a starkly different picture. They talk about later generations who just abandoned this righteous path. This contrast sets the stage for a deep dive into consequences, introducing the reality of divine retribution and the concept of Jahannam. First, let's define our terms following the source's lead. Jahannam, the Quranic word for hell, is presented here as something more than just a physical location. It's framed as the direct manifestation of a person's choices and beliefs on earth. A state of being where you experience the full, unvarnished consequences of those actions. And this is where the analysis gets incredibly specific. It argues that the punishment of Jahannam isn't one-dimensional at all. Instead, it makes this critical distinction between two completely different types of suffering, one that's physical and another, described as far more intense, that is purely spiritual. So the distinction is between what's called adhab jismani, or physical torment that affects a body in the afterlife, and adhab ruhani, spiritual torment. The source argues that the spiritual pain is way, way worse. This is the pain of regret, of separation, of finally understanding the true magnitude of what you've lost. It's a torment of consciousness itself. To back up this idea, the source brings in this incredibly powerful verse. I mean, listen to that language, a fire that mounts up over the hearts. This isn't talking about burning skin. The analysis presents this as crystal clear scriptural evidence for a kind of punishment that goes beyond the physical, targeting the very core of your being. The heart, the seat of your consciousness and emotions. That right there is the essence of spiritual torment. All this talk about spiritual reality leads us straight into the most metaphysical part of this entire analysis. the state of the soul after death, but before the final judgment. This in-between realm is known as barzakh. So the source text tackles this question head-on. After you die, what's the nature of your existence? Are you just a formless spirit floating around, or do you have some kind of body? Well, the analysis asserts that you absolutely do have a form in barzakh, but it's fundamentally different from the physical one you have now. So you can think of barzakh as an interval, the period between physical death and the resurrection. And the crucial point from the source is that the soul is not just some formless essence in this realm. It has a body, but it's a body not made of the same physical stuff, the same atoms and molecules as our earthly one. The term that the source uses for this non-physical body is mithali, which you could translate as something like archetypal or imaginal. The whole concept is that the soul has a form that is perfectly designed to perceive and interact with this non-physical dimension. It's this mithali body that experiences all the realities of that intermediate state. Now, if that sounds a little abstract, the source provides a fantastic analogy to help us wrap our heads around it: the experience of a dream. Just think about it for a second. In a dream, you have a body. You see, you hear, you feel things, but that dream body is obviously not your physical body, which is lying still in bed. This simple experience illustrates how the soul can have a fully functional form that's completely independent of its physical earthly body. Okay, so having gone through all these profound topics, for our final section, we're going to kind of zoom out. We're not just going to look at what the analysis concluded, but at the very method that was used to get to such a deep understanding of the text in the first place. So what's the ultimate takeaway from this whole method? It's that a single, seemingly straightforward verse, when you analyze it with this level of academic rigor, becomes a gateway. It just opens up these huge interlocking discussions on prophecy, on worship, on retribution, and on the very nature of existence after we die. And this isn't just one person's opinion. The real strength of this scholarly method is how it connects scripture with scripture. The argument is carefully built by weaving together tons of verses from all over the Quran, as you can see from all the citations in the source document. Every point is backed up by another one, creating this really coherent theological framework. This is what deep exegesis actually looks like in practice. And we'll end with a final question for you to reflect on. After exploring this detailed map of the hereafter, from spiritual realities to the nature of the soul, how does all this knowledge circle back to us, right here and now? How might a deeper understanding of the eternal consequences of our actions, as detailed in this analysis, reframe the way we view our own lives? Thank you for joining us.